You may not always feel chosen. Some days you wake up tired, misunderstood, stretched thin by responsibilities no one sees and prayers no one applauds. Yet there is a quiet truth echoing beneath the noise of your life. God's blessing does not always announce itself with ease, applause, or abundance. Often it reveals itself in subtle strengths, holy resilience, and unseen favor working behind the scenes. The world measures blessing by comfort and applause, but heaven measures blessing by alignment, endurance, and purpose. And if you're listening closely, you may discover that God has already marked your life in ways deeper than you imagined. One of the first signs you are a woman blessed by God is that you carry a strength you did not teach yourself. It is not the loud, aggressive strength that dominates a room, but the steady strength that holds a family together, the quiet courage that keeps you standing when everything inside you wants to sit down and quit. You have endured seasons you never planned for, losses you never asked for, and battles you never announced. Still, here you are, not because life was easy, but because grace was sufficient. This kind of strength is not self-made. It is heaven supplied. When God places his hand on a woman's life, he deposits endurance that outlasts the storm. You may not even recognize it as blessing because it came wrapped in pressure, but pressure has a way of revealing what God has already planted within you. Being blessed by God does not always announce itself through ease, comfort, or visible success. Often it appears in the form of a quiet strength that carries you through seasons you never planned for. This strength is not loud or dramatic. It does not demand attention or applause. It shows up when you wake up tired, yet still rise. It appears when your heart feels heavy, but you continue to love, serve, and believe. This kind of strength is not learned from books or built by self-discipline alone. It is planted by God and sustained by his grace. When heaven blesses a woman, it deposits endurance into her spirit that cannot be explained by circumstances. Many women question whether they are truly blessed because their lives feel difficult. They measure blessing by how smooth the road is, how quickly prayers are answered, or how much recognition they receive. But God's definition of blessing goes deeper than comfort. He often allows pressure not to break you, but to reveal what he has already placed inside you. Pressure does not create strength. It exposes it. The fact that you have endured what should have broken you is evidence that God has been carrying you all along. If you were relying only on yourself, you would have given up long ago. The reason you are still standing is because grace stepped in where your strength ended. This quiet strength shows itself most clearly in unseen moments. It is present when no one is watching, when you choose faith over fear in private, when you keep praying even after disappointment, and when you keep going despite unanswered questions. You may feel weak emotionally, but spiritually you are being held together by something greater than your emotions. God's strength does not always remove the burden. Sometimes it gives you the capacity to carry it. That capacity is a blessing even when it feels heavy. There are seasons when this strength feels unfair. You wonder why you have to be the strong one again, why others seem to break down while you are expected to hold everything together. But what you do not see is that God only entrusts certain weights to certain people. He knows what you can carry because he knows what he has placed within you. Your strength is not an accident, it is an assignment. God is shaping your character, deepening your faith, and preparing you for a future that requires spiritual resilience. This strength also keeps you moving forward when logic tells you to stop. You have experienced moments when everything in you wanted to quit, yet something deeper whispered, keep going. That whisper was not pressure, it was purpose. God's blessing often works quietly, nudging you forward one step at a time. You may not have had clarity, confidence, or energy, but you had just enough grace to take the next step. And sometimes that is the greatest miracle of all. What makes this strength divine is that it coexists with vulnerability. You are not unfeeling or unaffected. You cry, you feel tired, you experience doubt. Yet none of these things disqualify you. God's strength is perfected in weakness, not in perfection. Your tears do not cancel your blessing. They confirm that you are human while being sustained by something supernatural. The strength God gives does not harden your heart. It keeps it alive while life tries to wear it down. Over time, this strength becomes part of who you are. You stop panicking at every challenge. You learn to breathe in the middle of storms. You trust that if God carried you through before, he will do it again. This confidence is not arrogance, it is memory. You remember how far you have come and who brought you here. That remembrance anchors you when new challenges arise. Eventually, you realize that this quiet strength has been shaping your identity. You are no longer defined by what you lack or what went wrong. You are defined by the faith that kept you standing. God's blessing was never just about changing your situation. It was about transforming you within it. And that transformation is priceless. Long after circumstances change, the strength God built in you will remain. That is why this kind of blessing lasts. It does not fade when seasons shift because it was never dependent on seasons to begin with. When a woman remains tender after life has given her every reason to grow hard, it reveals a deep and often unseen blessing at work within her. Pain has a way of reshaping the heart. Disappointment, betrayal, neglect, and loss can either soften a person into compassion or harden them into self-protection. Many people survive hurt by closing themselves off, building emotional walls, and numbing their ability to feel. But when God's hand rests on a woman's life, he does not allow pain to poison her spirit. Instead, he preserves her heart, keeping it alive, responsive, and capable of love, even after it has been wounded. Tenderness after pain is not naivety. It is not the absence of wisdom or boundaries. It is the strength, to remain human in a world that rewards hardness. This tenderness shows itself when you still care deeply, even though caring has cost you before. It appears when you still pray for others, even those who disappointed you. It surfaces when you refuse to let bitterness define your personality or dictate your future. That refusal is not something the natural heart does easily. It is evidence that God has been quietly guarding your inner life, shielding it from being overtaken by resentment. There are moments when you could have justified becoming cold. You could have stopped trusting, stopped believing the best, stopped opening your heart. No one would have blamed you. Yet something within you resisted that path. You chose healing over hatred, softness over sarcasm, and faith over cynicism. Those choices were not made because pain was small, but because grace was greater. God's protection does not always prevent hurt, but it does prevent hurt from becoming your identity. He allows wounds, but he does not allow them to rule you. This preserved tenderness often feels risky. Being soft in a broken world can make you feel exposed and vulnerable. You may wonder if staying tender means you will be hurt again. But God does not preserve your heart to leave it unguarded. He teaches you how to love without losing yourself, how to forgive without excusing harm, and how to remain compassionate while growing wise. A blessed woman learns that tenderness and boundaries are not opposites. They can coexist when God is shaping the heart. Tenderness also reveals spiritual health. A heart that still feels is a heart that is still alive. When disappointment no longer moves you, when unjust, ice no longer stirs you, and when suffering no longer touches you, something sacred has been lost. God protects you from that numbness. He allows you to feel deeply because he created you to love deeply. Your sensitivity is not a flaw to correct. It is a gift to steward. Through it, God enables you to connect, to empathize, and to reflect his own compassion to the world. This tender heart becomes a place where God can speak clearly. Hardened hearts struggle to hear his voice because they are constantly defending themselves. But a heart kept soft by God remains teachable, responsive, and open. Even after pain, you still listen. Even after disappointment, you still seek God's direction. That posture invites divine guidance and keeps you aligned with his purpose. It is no coincidence that God often entrusts sensitive hearts with deeper spiritual insight. Over time, this tenderness transforms the way you relate to others. You become someone people feel safe around. Your presence brings calm, understanding, and acceptance, not because you have all the answers, but because you know what it means to hurt and still choose love. God uses your preserved heart as a vessel of healing. Others find comfort in your words, hope in your empathy, and strength in your resilience. What once wounded you now equips you to support others without judgment. There will be days when you wish you could turn this tenderness off, when feeling deeply feels exhausting. But in those moments, remember that God is close to the tenderhearted. He draws near to those who refuse to let pain make them cruel. Your softness has not gone unnoticed in heaven. Every time you chose compassion over bitterness, God was shaping something beautiful within you. He was forming a heart that reflects his own. Remaining tender after pain is one of the clearest signs that God has been protecting you all along. You are not untouched by life. You are preserved within it. Your heart still beats with hope, faith, and love because God has kept it that way. And as long as your heart remains alive, your purpose remains active. This tenderness is not a weakness to overcome. It is a blessing to honor. Discernment is one of the quietest yet most powerful signs that God's hand is guiding a woman's life. It does not announce itself loudly or demand recognition, but it consistently protects, redirects, and preserves. Discernment is that inner awareness that helps you sense when something is not aligned with God, even when it looks appealing on the surface. It is the reason you hesitate before saying yes, the reason you feel uneasy without logical explanation, and the reason you sometimes walk away from situations others run toward. This kind of awareness is not overthinking or fear. It is God communicating with your spirit. Many women struggle to trust their discernment because it often contradicts logic, emotions, or public opinion. You may have felt peace disappear in environments that seemed promising or sensed danger in relationships that looked harmless. At times, you may have ignored that inner warning, only to later realize it was God trying to protect you. Discernment grows through experience and obedience. Each time you listen to that still inner voice, your sensitivity sharpens. Each time you dismiss it, the consequences teach you why it mattered. God uses both obedience and correction to train you in spiritual awareness. This discernment is not meant to isolate you or make you suspicious of everyone. It is meant to keep you aligned. God understands the paths that will strengthen you and the ones that will slowly drain you. Through discernment, he steers you away from distractions that look productive but are spiritually empty, and from relationships that feel exciting but lead to compromise. When doors close without explanation, discernment helps you trust that God is rearranging your steps, not denying your destiny. A woman blessed by God often experiences unexplained restraint. You may feel a strong urge to pause, wait, or step back when everything around you encourages speed and action. This restraint can feel frustrating, especially when you want progress and clarity. But discernment teaches you that timing is just as important as opportunity. God's favor does not rush you into seasons you are not prepared for. Sometimes the blessing is not the opportunity itself, but the wisdom to wait until the moment is right. Discernment also brings emotional clarity. It helps you separate intuition guided by God from emotions driven by fear or desire. You learn the difference between anxiety and warning, between excitement and confirmation. This clarity does not make decisions effortless, but it makes them safer. You may still feel the weight of choosing, but you are less likely to compromise your peace. God values your peace because it is tied to your obedience and spiritual health. As discernment matures, you become less dependent on external validation. You stop needing constant reassurance from others because you trust God's guidance within you. This does not mean you reject wise counsel, but it means you no longer allow opinions to override conviction. You recognize that not everyone will understand your decisions, and that is okay. God does not reveal his plans to everyone. Sometimes he speaks to you alone because the assignment is personal and the process is sacred. There are moments when discernment requires courage. Walking away from something that looks good to protect something that is God ordained can feel lonely. People may question your choices or misinterpret your motives, but discernment teaches you that approval is not the same as alignment. A woman guided by God learns to value peace over popularity and obedience over applause. That choice may cost her comfort, but it preserves her purpose. Over time, discernment becomes a form of spiritual confidence. You are not easily shaken by trends, pressure, or comparison. You trust that God is ordering your steps, even when the path looks unconventional. You understand that favor is not always found in open doors. Sometimes it is found in closed ones. Looking back, you begin to see how many times God protected you from outcomes that would have altered your destiny. What once felt like delay reveals itself as mercy. Discernment is God's way of staying close to you. It is evidence that he values your future and is actively involved in your decisions. He does not leave you to figure life out alone. He whispers, warns, nudges, and redirects because he cares deeply about where you are going and who you are becoming. When you honor that inner guidance, you align yourself with his wisdom. And alignment more than opportunity is what keeps a woman truly blessed. Ace that remains steady in the middle of uncertainty is one of the clearest signs of a life anchored in God. This peace does not come from having everything figured out, nor does it depend on favorable circumstances. It exists even when questions are unanswered, outcomes are unclear, and the future feels fragile. Many people believe peace arrives after problems are resolved, but spiritual peace often arrives before resolution. It is God's way of reminding you that his presence is greater than your uncertainty. This peace does not mean you are unaffected by what is happening around you. You still feel concern, disappointment, and the weight of responsibility. You still think about what could go wrong. But beneath those thoughts is a calm assurance that refuses to panic. While fear tries to rush your decisions and anxiety tries to steal your rest, peace keeps you grounded. It allows you to pause, pray, and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. That ability to remain steady is not natural. It is cultivated through trust in God's character. Trust develops over time, especially in seasons where God's silence feels louder than his answers. When prayers are delayed, peace becomes a daily choice. You learn to trust who God is, even when you do not understand what he is doing. This kind of trust does not ignore reality. It acknowledges it while placing greater confidence in God's faithfulness. You know that if God has carried you through past uncertainties, he can be trusted with the present one. Memory becomes a source of peace, reminding you that God has never failed you before. This peace reshapes how you approach challenges. Instead of being driven by urgency and pressure, you begin to move with discernment and patience. You realize that rushing rarely produces clarity. Peace teaches you that waiting does not mean inactivity. It means alignment. While you wait, God works within you, strengthening your faith, refining your motives, and preparing you for what is next. Peace keeps you from forcing doors that God intends to open in his time. Uncertainty often exposes where we place our security. When circumstances shift, what you truly rely on is revealed. Peace rooted in God remains steady because it is not built on outcomes. It is built on relationship. You trust God not because you know how everything will end, but because you know his heart toward you. That relationship sustains you when plans change, when expectations are unmet, and when life feels unpredictable. This peace also influences how you treat others. When you are not consumed by anxiety, you have the emotional space to be patient, kind, and understanding. You do not transfer your stress onto those around you. Instead, you become a calming presence. People may not understand how you remain composed, but your peace speaks louder than words. It reflects a confidence that God is in control. Even when situations suggest otherwise, there will be moments when peace feels challenged. News arrives, doors close, or delays stretch longer than expected. In those moments, peace becomes an act of surrender. You consciously release the need to control what is beyond your reach. You remind yourself that worry does not add clarity, but trust invites guidance. Peace does not deny fear's existence. It chooses not to let fear lead. Each time you make that choice, your trust deepens. As peace becomes a pattern in your life, it changes your spiritual posture. You begin to expect God to show up, not because you are entitled to answers, but because you know his nature. You believe he will provide wisdom at the right time, strength when you are tired, and direction when you feel lost. This expectation does not create impatience. It creates confidence. You rest not because life is easy, but because God is reliable. Living with peace and uncertainty is a testimony in itself. It declares that your faith is not dependent on clarity, success, or immediate results. It reveals a heart that has learned to trust beyond what it can see. God grants this peace to those who lean into him, not away from him, during uncertain seasons. It is both a gift and a sign. A gift that guards your heart, and a sign that your trust is rooted in something eternal. Obedience that costs you something is one of the clearest indicators that God is shaping your life with intention. Easy obedience requires little faith, but costly obedience stretches your trust and refines your character. There are moments when God asks you to choose what is right over what is comfortable, what is aligned over what is appealing, and what is eternal over what is immediate. These moments often feel heavy because they involve sacrifice. Yet sacrifice in God's hands is never meaningless. It is a positioning tool, placing you where purpose can unfold. Costly obedience often appears in quiet decisions that others never see. It may look like walking away from a relationship you hoped would work, turning down an opportunity that promised quick reward, or remaining faithful when compromise would be easy. These choices rarely come with applause. In fact, they can invite misunderstanding and loneliness. But obedience is not about being understood by people. It is about being aligned with God. When you obey despite the cost, you demonstrate trust in God's wisdom over your own desires. There are seasons when obedience feels like loss. You let go of plans you invested time, emotion, and hope into. You release outcomes you carefully imagined. In those moments, it is natural to wonder if obedience is worth the pain. But God does not ask you to surrender to deprive you. He asks you to surrender to prepare you. What you release in obedience creates space for something greater to grow. God sees beyond the present sacrifice to the future impact. This kind of obedience matures your faith. You no longer follow God only when his direction aligns with your preferences. You follow him because you trust his perspective. Faith deepens when it is tested, and obedience under pressure is where faith becomes real. You learn that God's instructions are not random. They are intentional steps leading you toward a purpose you cannot yet fully see. Each obedient choice strengthens your spiritual muscles, making you more resilient and discerning. Costly obedience also builds integrity. When your private decisions match your public faith, your life becomes consistent. You are not living two versions of yourself, one for display and one for survival. This integrity creates inner peace. You may face external challenges, but internally you are settled because you know you honored God. That peace becomes a reward in itself, sustaining you when results are delayed. God often uses obedience to redirect your path. You may think you are giving something up, when in reality you are being guided away from a detour. Obedience closes doors that would have distracted you, delayed you, or diluted your calling. At times, you will only understand the protection in hindsight. Looking back, you will recognize that what felt like sacrifice was actually rescue. There is also a spiritual trust that develops through obedience. God entrusts greater responsibility to those who are faithful with smaller, harder choices. When you prove willing to obey without guarantees, God knows he can rely on you. This trust does not mean life becomes easier, but it means your influence increases. God prepares you through obedience so you can carry future blessings without being overwhelmed by them. Costly obedience reshapes how you measure success. Instead of asking whether something benefits you immediately, you begin to ask whether it honors God. This shift changes your priorities and clarifies your direction. You stop chasing outcomes and start pursuing alignment. That alignment brings a sense of purpose that success alone cannot provide. Over time, obedience teaches you that God's plans are always rooted in love. Even when his instructions feel restrictive, they are designed to protect your future. You may not see the full picture, but God does. Obedience is your way of placing trust in his vision over your limited view. When you obey despite the cost, you position yourself for growth, depth, and lasting impact. This is why costly obedience is not a burden. It is a blessing that shapes your destiny. Being used by God to bless others while you yourself are still waiting is one of the most humbling and refining experiences of faith. It often feels paradoxical. You may be praying for your own breakthrough, clarity, or relief, yet God continues to ask you to pour into others. You encourage, support, pray, and serve, even when your own heart feels tired. At times, this can feel unfair, as if you are giving from a place of need rather than abundance. But this pattern is not neglect, it is trust. God uses people who are willing, not just those who feel full. This kind of blessing requires a selfless heart. When you choose to show up for others despite your own waiting, you demonstrate a faith that is not dependent on immediate results. You are saying that God's work matters, even when your personal desires are unresolved. This posture reveals maturity. It shows that your faith is anchored in God's purpose, not just in what he can give you. God sees this willingness and honors it, even when the reward is not immediate. Serving while waiting stretches your perspective. It shifts your focus from what is missing to what is meaningful. In the act of giving, you discover that God often meets you in motion. Strength appears while you are serving, not before. Encouragement flows through you even as you need it yourself. This does not mean your needs are ignored. It means God is teaching you that his presence is not limited by your circumstances. He can work through you and in you at the same time. There are moments when this season feels emotionally draining. You may wonder when it will be your turn, when someone will pour into you the way you have poured into others. God understands this longing. He does not dismiss your weariness. Instead, he uses this season to refine your motives and deepen your dependence on him. You learn to draw strength from God rather than from outcomes. This reliance strengthens your spiritual foundation and prepares you for future seasons of abundance. Being a blessing while waiting also reveals God's confidence in your character. He trusts you to steward influence with humility. He knows you will not become entitled or prideful when blessings arrive because you learn to serve without them. This trust is a form of favor. God often tests our readiness for increase by observing how we handle responsibility during lack. Those who remain faithful in waiting are often those who carry future blessings with grace. Your waiting season becomes a source of empathy. Because you know what it feels like to hope and wait, you can comfort others with sincerity. Your words carry authenticity because they are born from experience, not theory. People sense this and feel understood in your presence. God uses your journey to bring healing to others, transforming your waiting into a ministry that reaches beyond you. There's also a spiritual exchange happening in these moments. When you pour out, God pours in, often in ways you do not immediately recognize. Peace replaces frustration. Joy surfaces unexpectedly. Purpose strengthens resolve. These inner gifts sustain you until external answers arrive. God may not always change your circumstances quickly, but he changes you deeply. That transformation is a blessing that lasts longer than any temporary breakthrough. Over time, you begin to see that this season was not a delay, but preparation. God was expanding your capacity, teaching you compassion and shaping your heart to reflect his own. When your breakthrough comes, you will recognize that you are being trained to handle it. Blessing others while waiting does not mean you are overlooked. It means you are being entrusted with something sacred. God is not wasting your season. He is using it to form a life that will bless many, including you. God's protection does not always arrive in ways that feel comforting or gentle. Often it comes disguised as loss, interruption, or redirection. A relationship ends without closure. An opportunity collapses at the last moment. A plan you prayed over suddenly falls apart. In those moments, it is natural to feel confused, rejected, or disappointed. Yet many of the greatest acts of divine protection are hidden inside experiences that feel like failure. God sees outcomes you cannot see, and his protection works ahead of your awareness. Loss has a way of challenging your trust. When something is taken from you or does not work out as expected, you may question God's intentions. But protection is not always about what God gives. Sometimes it is about what he prevents. What feels like rejection may be God removing you from environments that would slowly damage your spirit. What feels like delay may be God shielding you from responsibilities you were not meant to carry. God's love is proactive, not reactive. He does not wait for harm to happen before he intervenes. Redirection often feels personal, as if you did something wrong, but many closed doors have nothing to do with failure and everything to do with alignment. God closes doors not to punish, but to preserve. He understands the weight of paths you cannot yet see and the consequences that would follow certain choices. When he interrupts your plans, it is because he is guiding you away from detours that would cost you peace, purpose, or identity. These moments of protection require surrender. You may never receive a full explanation for why something ended or changed. Trust becomes essential. You learn to believe that God's wisdom exceeds your understanding. This trust does not erase grief, but it reframes it. You grieve what was lost while believing it was not meant to define your future. God allows you to feel disappointment, but he does not intend for it to imprison you. Over time, perspective brings clarity. Looking back, you begin to recognize patterns of mercy in moments that once felt painful. You see how close you were to choices that would have led to exhaustion, compromise, or regret. You notice how certain relationships, though appealing, would have drained your faith. You realize how plans you insisted on would have limited your growth. What once felt like loss reveals itself as rescue. God's protective redirection also shapes your discernment. Each closed door trains you to trust his guidance more deeply. You become less resistant to change and more open to divine interruption. Instead of clinging tightly to your own plans, you learn to hold them loosely, allowing God to adjust your course. This flexibility is a sign of spiritual maturity. It shows that you value God's will over your comfort. There are times when God's protection feels isolating. When paths diverge and relationships end, you may feel alone. But isolation in these seasons is often intentional. God uses quiet and separation to reset your focus, heal wounds, and clarify your purpose. He removes distractions so he can speak more clearly. What feels like loneliness can become intimacy with God if you allow it. Protection disguised as loss teaches gratitude for what did not happen. You begin to thank God not only for blessings received, but for disasters avoided. You learn to appreciate his restraint as much as his provision. This gratitude transforms how you view challenges. Instead of asking why something was taken away, you begin to ask what God was protecting you from. When you accept that redirection is part of God's care, you walk forward with greater confidence. You trust that even when plans change, purpose remains intact. God's protection does not always feel like shelter. Sometimes it feels like pruning, but pruning is proof of investment. God removes what cannot stay so what must grow can thrive. Loss and redirection, when guided by God, are not endings. They are pathways to a safer, stronger future. Hope is one of the most powerful signs that God is at work in a woman's life, especially when circumstances suggest otherwise. True hope does not deny reality. It acknowledges it while refusing to be defined by it. It is the quiet voice inside that continues to believe in God's promises, even when answers are delayed, circumstances are difficult, or progress seems slow. A woman who carries hope demonstrates a faith that looks beyond what she can see and trusts in what God has spoken. Hope is not wishful thinking. It is confidence in the character of God and his ability to fulfill what he has promised. Hope grows in the middle of waiting. There are seasons when prayers seem unanswered, doors remain closed, and clarity is absent. During these seasons, it would be easy to give up, to grow cynical, or to settle for less than what God intended. Yet hope keeps the spirit alive. It whispers that God's timing is perfect and that his plans are never thwarted. Even when the evidence suggests delay or disappointment, hope refuses to bow to circumstance. It carries faith into the unseen, believing that the story is not finished. This kind of hope is cultivated through experience. Every time you have seen God intervene, every time he has come through when the odds were against you, your hope grows stronger. Memory becomes a foundation for trust. You recall moments when things seemed impossible, yet God made a way. You remember times of disappointment that eventually became testimonies. These memories anchor your hope, reminding you that what God has done before, he is able to do again. Hope also transforms how you handle trials. It prevents despair from taking root and allows you to respond with patience and faith. When problems arise, you do not react with panic or give up at the first obstacle. Instead, hope gives you endurance. It strengthens your perseverance and helps you navigate uncertainty with confidence. Challenges become opportunities to rely on God rather than giving in to fear. Your hope acts as a spiritual compass, guiding your heart and choices, even when the path forward is unclear. One of the most significant aspects of hope is that it sustains action. Waiting can feel passive, but hope is active. It motivates prayer, effort, and preparation while trusting God for the outcome. You continue to work, serve, and move forward because hope insists that the future is not yet written. Hope keeps you faithful in seasons of delay, knowing that God's promises are true even when the timeline seems long. It transforms waiting from frustration into an opportunity for growth. Hope also influences relationships. A woman who carries hope does not pass cynicism or fear to those around her. Instead, her hope uplifts, encourages, and inspires. People are drawn to her because she embodies trust and confidence that tomorrow holds promise. Her faithfulness in waiting becomes a beacon for others who are struggling with doubt or despair. Hope is contagious because it points to God's faithfulness, not human effort. Spiritual hope is rooted in God's character rather than circumstances. It is anchored in who he is, not in what he does. This distinction makes hope unshakable. Circumstances may change, plans may fail, and people may disappoint, but God remains faithful. A woman blessed with hope carries an unmovable certainty that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating her life for his purposes. That certainty is what sustains her when everything else seems uncertain. Hope also shapes perspective. It allows you to see setbacks as temporary and challenges as part of a larger plan. You recognize that what feels like delay may be preparation, and what seems like obstacles may be refining experiences. Hope shifts focus from immediate results to eternal outcomes. It trains the heart to look beyond what is visible, to trust the invisible hand of God guiding each step. This perspective provides clarity and peace that surpasses understanding. Ultimately, hope is a testimony of God's faithfulness in the making. It is the evidence of a heart that believes in God's promises and refuses to surrender to despair. A woman who carries hope demonstrates that she is not defined by temporary circumstances, but by the eternal faithfulness of God. Her hope anchors her in storms, sustains her through waiting, and prepares her for the fulfillment of promises. It is both a sign of blessing and a vehicle for future blessings. Hope does not disappoint because it trusts the one who never fails. It carries a vision of tomorrow that empowers a woman to keep moving forward, confident that God is not finished with her story.